Message this morning is giving thanks. And we're going to read as our text from the book of Luke, Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. You might know this story. This is the story of Jesus healing the 10 lepers. Luke chapter 17, we're going to read verses 11 through 19. Luke records this story from the ministry of Jesus. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When Jesus saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" And he said to him, "Rise and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." A pastor friend of mine was reading this story from the book of Luke to a group of children in a children's sermon. And after he read the story to them, he asked them, "What do you think about that story? How do you think Jesus felt?" One little girl raised up her hand and said, "I'll bet Jesus was so happy that one person came back to thank him." That's a pretty positive, optimistic understanding of the story. It's told to us not to tell us, look how great it was that one person came back to give thanks. It's told to tell us, look how 9 people forgot to be thankful. Now, before we're too harsh on these lepers, a few things are in order to say about them. They stood at a distance when Jesus came by, and they were required by Mosaic law to do that. They couldn't get close to people for fear of contaminating them. All 10 of them called out to Jesus for help, for mercy. So we assume by that they believed he could help them, so that's in their favor. When Jesus told them to go show themselves to the priests, we assume that at that exact moment they hadn't been healed yet, that it was in the act of turning around and going to show themselves to the priests that they would be healed, or that they were healed, and so that's good. All 10 of them turned around and started doing what Jesus had told them to do. They all started heading toward the priest, and so we assume from that, maybe believing that they were going to be healed, even though they hadn't been healed yet. Now, the purpose of their visiting the priest is laid out in the book of Leviticus, Leviticus chapter 14. They were to go show themselves to the priest. The priest would examine them, certify that they had in fact been healed, and they could return to their normal lives. And so when we ask ourselves, what is it about the other 9 that they didn't stop to give thanks? These were not evil people. You know, when Jesus told them, "Go show yourselves to the priest," they didn't head out to the corner bar, to go get drunk. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They turned around, started going back to the priest, and believing in what Jesus could do. Probably what was in their minds, the reason they didn't come back to give Jesus thanks, is that they were thinking about returning back to normal life, going back to their job, whatever that was, going back to their family, being reunited with wife and children, if they had that, or with loved ones. So it's not that they were evil, it's just that they got caught up in life, and they didn't stop to give thanks to God. I don't know that Luke and Jesus are trying to give us a math lesson here, that this works out that 10% of the people in the world are like that and 90% are like the others. But I'll tell you what, there are more people in life who are like the 9 lepers than there are who are like the 1 leper. I remember reading a story about a man, his name was Ed Spencer. He was a seminary student at Garrett Theological Seminary. This was back in Illinois. This was back just before the Civil War broke out, 1860. And he was in his dorm room asleep one night when he heard people screaming, other students in the dorm screaming, and heard a loud commotion outside. And when he ran to the window to look out, he quickly surmised what had happened. 2 ships there on one of the Great Lakes, 2 ships had collided. And it was in the winter, it was nighttime, and clearly a lot of people were going to die. One of the ships, which was a lumber freighter, was actually starting to sink. And so he quickly dressed and ran downstairs. Now, Ed Spencer happened to be an excellent swimmer. And so while most people weren't willing to jump into those frigid waters and go out and start rescuing people, he did. And he would swim out to get someone and bring them back to shore. And he did that 17 times. He rescued 17 people. There were 287 people who died in the collision, 92 people who were rescued. Of the 92 people who were rescued, Ed Spencer personally rescued 17 of them. Now, years later, he moved to California, lived here in Los Angeles, and he suffered health issues for the rest of his life because of what he did that night from the effects of hypothermia. But years later, on the anniversary of that shipwreck where so many people had lost their lives, the Los Angeles Times interviewed him. And they asked him what were his recollections about that night when, as a young man, he had rescued 17 people. And this is what he said. "This is my recollection. Of the 17 people I rescued, not one of them ever thanked me." Now, how do we get to the point in life when we can be like that? When we stop being thankful to God, when we stop being grateful. I think part of it, we get like that when we forget that everything in life is a gift from God. Everything in life, including life itself, is a gift from God. There is nothing that God owes me. There is nothing that I deserve. Everything that I have is by God's grace. And when we get that in our minds, we finally have the proper theology to go with the proper practice. You know, we always say as we study these books of the Bible that theology and practice are connected, that what we do is related to what we believe. Paul writes this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18. "Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is the will of God for you who belong to Christ Jesus." That's quite a statement, isn't it? Be thankful in all circumstances. No exceptions, no excuses. In everything, give thanks, no matter what your circumstances or trials might be. No matter what, in all things be thankful to God, he says. Gratitude is the essence of the Christian life. And a lack of gratitude is the essence of the unregenerate life. Paul writes this in Romans chapter 1, verse 21. He identifies the ungodly in part by their lack of gratitude. He says, they did not honor God, nor did they give him thanks. And when you give thanks to God, no matter what your circumstances are, you're showing that your heart and your theology are in the right place. So one of the ways we get to that point where we stop being thankful is it's because we've forgotten that everything in life is a gift, that God doesn't owe us anything, we don't deserve anything, it's all by God's grace. The second thing is that we forget what the Bible teaches us, that in every circumstance of life, God is at work in our lives. Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, "We know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. Now that's an overarching principle there that covers every area of the Christian life. No matter what happens in life, it falls under that umbrella of Romans 8:28, that in every circumstance of life, God is actively at work. The thing itself may not be good, but God is working in it to bring about good. And if you believe that, if you believe in all your heart that in everything that happens to you in life, that God can work in it to bring about good, that God can blend together each component of your life to arrive at a divinely designed goal for your life, then you can handle anything and be thankful, because you know that no matter what happens, God is at work because of it. One day we'll see the end result. We'll see what God has been up to. We'll see what God has been designing, and then it will make sense. But even before we see it, just like the lepers who turned around before they were healed, we need to be thankful. I think we get to the point where we stop being thankful because we also forget something else the Bible teaches. That every problem, every challenge in life is an opportunity for growth, change, or improvement. Consider the story of a young man who was often sick as a baby. When he grew up as a child and then later as a youth, he was very frail and delicate. He couldn't play outside with the other boys and do the things that boys do. Just sick most of his life. As an adult, he felt called of God to enter into the ministry, and so he did that. He became a minister. But eventually his health issues were such that he couldn't perform his duties as a minister. And so he looked for something that he could do indoors, considering his poor health. And so he always had a gift with words, with writing, and so he turned his energies to hymn writing. Now he felt that the hymns of his day were lacking, that they were too somber, and they didn't express the joy of Christianity and the hopefulness that is part of our faith. And so one day when he was complaining about the hymns of his day, someone, and I think it was his dad, challenged him to write better hymns. He said, if you don't like the hymns we have, write some better ones. And so he did. He wrote over 600 hymns in his lifetime. Many of them were taken straight from the Bible, from the book of Psalm, Psalm 23, Psalm 72, and on, Psalm 90. He took these hymns and turned these psalms and turned them into hymns. When he died in 1748, he left behind one of the most remarkable collections of hymns the world has ever seen. In a few weeks, we'll be singing one of his, perhaps his best known hymn, Joy to the World. His name was Isaac Watts. He wrote hymns like Joy to the World, We're Marching to Zion, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, Alas, and Did My Savior Bleed, This is the Day That the Lord Has Made, and on and on and on. And his life illustrates a basic Christian principle. When life delivers a problem or pain, God is ready to use that problem or that pain to help you grow, to help you change, to help you prosper, and to help you become more like Jesus. Remember this. In every disaster, God has a gift for you. In every trial of life, God has a gift for you. Mark that down. And then here's the last thing. Gratitude. How do we get to the point where we're ungrateful? It's when our attitude goes south, goes bad. Because gratitude is intimately connected to attitude. And attitude affects your life at every moment. Everything in your life is affected by your attitude. Why does the Bible want us to give thanks in everything? It's because gratitude is an attitude that affects every part of our lives. It's amazing how our attitude changes once we start being thankful. Only one leper gave thanks. All of them were sick. All of them were healed. They were identical in all their circumstances. except only one was thankful. Now what's the difference? Well, in large part, it's attitude. Some people only see the negative in life. They cannot see the good. They cannot see the positive. And it's very hard to be thankful when all you see is negative. I was watching a show on one of the nature channels on television. It was about hummingbirds. They're fascinating little creatures. They fly over the desert and they look for the bright red or colorful blossoms that grow there in the desert. And when they see them, they go down and they drink the nectar from out of the blossoms. Now, vultures fly over the same desert, but all the vultures see is rotting meat. Now, what's the difference? They both see what they're looking for. The hummingbird is looking for the bright red flowers, and it lives off of it, feeds itself that nectar. It lives off of something that's alive. It lives off of what is. The vulture sees only death and decay, and it lives off of death and decay. It feeds itself with that. Both birds find exactly what they're looking for. And that's true of us. Whatever it is in life that we're looking for, that's what we find. And that's why I'm convinced that most of how our lives turn out is not about what happens to us in life, it's about what our attitude is about what happens to us. I don't know if it's 10% and 90% or 20% and 80%, but I'm convinced that most of what determines what our lives end up being like is not what happens to us, but what our attitude is about what happens to us. Charles Swindoll said this: "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude is more important than the past. It's more important than education. It's more important than money. It's more important than circumstances, than failures, than successes. It's more important than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. Attitude will make or break a company, a church, and a home." And then he says, the great thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will have for that day. We cannot change the past. We cannot change the way people behave. We cannot change the inevitable. The one thing that we can change is our attitude. Zig Ziglar summed all of that up in one little short sentence. He said, your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. When you have a problem, you have two choices, two possibilities. You can change the problem, or you can change your attitude. And quite often, there are problems in life that cannot be changed. And so then you only have one option, and that is to change your attitude. And giving thanks to God in all circumstances is the number one step in changing your attitude. There's an old Yiddish story that I just love. It's about a man. He was a very well-to-do, successful businessman, and he was quite interested in the scriptures. You know, he read the Bible every day. And he went to see his rabbi one day, and he said to him, you know, I've been reading the scriptures, and I think I understand everything except one thing. The Bible tells us that we should give thanks in all circumstances. And he said, I don't understand that. How are we supposed to give God thanks in every circumstance of life? Well, the rabbi knew he could never explain it to him in words. And so he said, what I want you to do, I want you to go across town and see a man named Ivan. Ivan is a water carrier. Now, if you don't know what a water carrier is, you know, in most parts of the world, this back-breaking labor of carrying water from either a well or a stream back into town for people to drink is usually done by animals, by oxen. But in some parts of the world, humans do it. And it's back-breaking labor. They get these two barrels or buckets of water up, and they put them on a stick, and they carry the stick with one bucket here and one bucket there, and they carry it back into town. And that's what Ivan did all day long. Had been doing it for 50 years, just carrying water from the stream into the village to sell to the people there. And he said, I want you to go see Ivan the water carrier. and ask him the question, how can we give thanks in every circumstance of life? And so the man said he would do it, and he got the directions on how to find Ivan, and he set out across town, and he went to the outskirts of town, and there he found Ivan, the water carrier. And he explained to Ivan what he was doing there, that he had been reading the scriptures and that everything made sense to him except one thing. He didn't understand how a person could give thanks to God in every circumstance of life. And he said, the rabbi sent me here to ask you. He said that you would be able to explain it to me. And Ivan stopped, and he set his buckets of water down. And he thought about it for a while, and he said to the man, I don't know why the rabbi sent you here to see me. I know that the rabbi is the wisest of men, but I don't know why he would send you here to ask me a question like that. He said, I can't answer it because nothing but wonderful things have happened to me in my life. He said, my life has been so good. I wake up every morning and every night before I go to bed, and I give thanks to God for his many blessings on me and on my family. And the man understood what the rabbi couldn't put into words. Everything can be taken from a person except one thing. And that is to choose your attitude in any set of circumstances. To choose your way in life, no matter what. How do we get to the point where we stop being thankful to God? In part, it's when we forget that everything in life is a gift. Nothing is owed us. There's nothing that we deserve. It's all God's grace. We forget when we stop being grateful, when we forget that God is at work in every circumstance of our lives. We stop being grateful when we forget that every problem, every challenge is an opportunity for growth, for change, and improvement. And we stop being thankful to God when our attitude becomes negative and all we see is the bad in life. So let me close by asking you, how's your attitude today? Do you want to change it? Do you want to make it better? The very first step is giving thanks to God in every circumstance. This morning we're going to close with an unusual invitation hymn. It's usually a song that we sing to open the service. Today we're going to close with it, hymn number 253, Praise God, from whom all blessings flow.